Okay.
This is Group 4's presentation of Amazon and emerging markets. So a little bit of background about Amazon. It was founded in 1994 by Jeff Bezos, who is the current CEO to this day. It's headquartered in Seattle, Washington, with distribution centers and offices throughout the world. The original goal of the website was to be able to supply any book to any person living in any place. Obviously, Amazon has expanded their offerings exponentially, and you can now find just about anything you could possibly need on Amazon because of this. In 1994, there was still a lot of uncertainty of just how much the internet would expand, and no one knew the ways that the internet would infiltrate every aspect of our daily lives. Amazon has become the largest internet retailer in the US because of the amount of things that they offer, as well as their unbeatable prices and their convenience of use. When Amazon launched their IPO in 1997, the stock price was only $18 per share, but it is now inflated to almost $1,700 per share. Amazon is also continuing to expand, and they currently have websites in at least 14 countries. Each new expansion has brought unique challenges that Amazon has had to face, but has also brought new lessons and experiences that help them with their next expansions. We're first going to talk about the Amazon expansion to China. Amazon first entered into the Chinese marketplace in 2004 with the acquisition of Joyo.com, which was an already existing website for e-commerce within China. For the business model, Amazon entered China after purchasing Joyo in 2004, and they mainly offered books, DVDs, and CDs at the beginning. They also began to offer electronics, baby products, beauty care products, and watches. They strive to replicate and achieve customer satisfaction through the customer experience model it delivered to customers in developed markets. They finally adopted Joyo.com's cash-on-delivery option. They did this because many people in China were not comfortable with paying for their goods up front and would rather pay once they take delivery of their goods. Timing. Most of existing Chinese competition was founded in 1999. Amazon entered the market less than 5 years after the e-commerce started to develop in this country, meaning in 2004, Amazon entered the Chinese market for the first time. Amazon's goal was to break in early to the e-commerce craze like they had done in the United States. The challenge of doing this was that China had already had competition that had been formed in the years prior to Amazon entering the market, which forced them to encounter additional challenges. Some of their biggest competitors, which continue to have market share, are Alibaba and Jingdong Mall, or JD.com, which is known as. They entered a fast-growing market early on in an attempt to capture more of the market than waiting too long. Economic infrastructure. Chinese users were at the forefront of using social media to stay connected. It was more of a way of life in China than it had been in the United States. In just 2 years, from 2002 to 2004, the number of internet users in China increased over 50 million users, from 27 million in 2002 to over 80 million in 2004. This showed that the market for websites like this was also growing at an exponential rate. In 2004, 46% of the Chinese population were internet users. This equated to more than double the amount of the US's 266 million internet users. In some regions of China, such as the cities, there were an incredibly high population of internet users, while in other areas, usually more rural areas, there was a much smaller of internet users that were currently active. Political infrastructure. China is a communist country, which presented other challenges that they had not yet faced. Being that China was a communist country, there is more regulation on businesses. For example, Amazon cannot own Amazon China outright, so for the first year of operation, they had to operate under the Joyo.com name. Amazon had acquired Joyo in 2004 right upon their entry for about $75 million and used this as a necessary way to enter the Chinese market. Analysis. The expansion had overall mixed results. It was not a runaway success, but it was also not all bad. The expansion was more of a challenge than they thought it would be in many areas. There were several reasons for this. One was the amount of government regulation. This put restrictions on them, such as needing to operate under Joyo's name when they first entered the marketplace. Another was the amount of competition that they had. When Amazon launched in the US in the early 90s, They were really at the forefront of this trend, so the competition wasn't as fierce as it was in China, at least when they were first launching. In China, it was a different story. They entered into the marketplace later, so they had many of their competitors already formed there. To put things into perspective, at the end of 2012, Amazon only had a 3.5 market share in China. Although this doesn't sound all that impressive, as we can see from the graph on the screen, they were still in the top 5 retailers for e-commerce in China. The good news is that Amazon can use the lessons that they learned in China and in their other expansions in order to better facilitate their future international expansions.
Hi, I'm Nelson Espinoza, and I will talk about Amazon experience in Brazil. The business model. Amazon launched the introduction of the Kindle ebook store and the Kindle e-reader. According to estimates, Brazilians spent 435 million in books in 2012, valued in $2 billion. Only 3% of the sales were directed to ebooks. Amazon wanted to take advantage of this and exploit the e-reading market. Book publishers made things rough for Amazon as they delayed the launch of the Kindle e-store because of their fear of Amazon aggressive discounts. Therefore, Amazon had to make agreements with this publisher to launch the ebook, the Kindle. Logistics make things complicated for Amazon in Brazil. Amazon had to leave logistics aside and handed the operation of logistics to external partners in Brazil. Due to high costs on electronic imports, the price of the Kindle Paperwhite was being sold at double the price of sale in the US. This led to Amazon to offer the customer the option of payment in installments. Now, timing. Amazon entering in Brazil was a late entrance. They entered 13 years after their launching of a well-established competitor as Mercado Libre. Mercado Libre had already been settled and established in the market, which made the competition difficult. Also, Brazil was rapidly growing before Amazon launching into the Brazilian market. They faced with webs of tax codes, labor laws, logistic challenge, and strong competition. Also, economic downturn started a year after Amazon entering Brazilian market, which was unfortunate for Amazon. The economic infrastructure. In 2012, Brazil was one of the world's largest emerging markets. They were ranked 7th in the world GDP with a value of 2.2 trillion. In 2014, Brazil started ranking 116th in the world's bank's ease of doing business. This was because of the high taxes and high difficulty of doing business in Brazil. Also, in 2014, they were ranked 159th out of 189 companies in the ease of paying taxes. In 2014, Brazilian economy went to a downfall after corruption and political instability, which is already being unsolved in Latin American countries. Political infrastructure. Tax rate of 68.3% due to labor laws and regulations was something that increased the cost of Amazon products in Brazil. Labor laws and regulations were costly due to requirements of employers to pay for meals, transportation, and health insurance, and 30 days on vacation and mandatory bonuses for their employees. Also, high duties on electronic imports were were applied to Amazon imports, and that caused the increase of the cost of Amazon products. Lessons learned. First, revision of regulations and laws. Amazon had to learned that they should revise better the regulations and laws of countries before entering their market. In this case, high taxes rates on electronic imports and labor laws unfavored Amazon launching to the Brazilian market. Second, recognition of competitors. Amazon had difficulties entering the market and required agreement with ebook publishers. Also, well-established competitors control a large part of the market share. And third, economical infrastructure analysis. Brazilian economy was rising increasingly in 2012, but it was predicted that in 2014 a downfall in the economy would happen. Better economical infrastructure analysis was required to predict Brazilian economy downfall and avoid Amazon losing money.
Hi, this is Fran Broderick, and I'm going to discuss how Amazon used some of the lessons from China and Brazil in their expansion into India. Amazon entered India in 2013, following India liberalizing some of their strict foreign direct investment laws. They knew that their competitors had a head start of 5 to 9 years, and they knew that they wanted to invest big from the start. They made their first foray into India by purchasing Junglee.com. India is a growing economy. It's projected to grow 61 times over in the next decade, and Indian e-commerce was estimated at $16 billion in 2013. With the liberalization of rules for investment, Amazon was able to enter the market more, but they still had restrictions and had to act as more of a pure marketplace. Indian retail was and is dominated by local mom and pop shops, so Amazon had to find ways to work with these local groups. Part of these regulations meant that foreign multi-brand retailers were forbidden to own 51% of the organization, and there were import duties on certain products. So whereas Amazon sold a number of their own products in the United States, they could not repeat this process in India and had to act more as a middleman. In addition, they had to consider that the lifestyles of Indians are changing, and there's a transition currently undergoing from rural centers to urban centers. When Amazon entered India, roughly 70% of the population were in rural areas. However, it's estimated that 590 million Indians will live in cities by 2030, and that they will account for 70% of Indian GDP, according to McKinsey. Some of the big risks that Amazon faced when expanding into India was that 70% of the population lived in rural areas, and much of these areas lacked infrastructure. A third of these villages lacked all-weather roads, and to add to confusion, streets lacked sequential numbering, and they didn't have orderly layouts. It was sort of smatterings of neighborhoods in rural areas, and Amazon had to not only figure out how to reach these buyers, but also how to adapt to their preferences, because as they learned in China, a number of these buyers preferred to pay cash on delivery. So Amazon approached India with a business model that was essentially at first a pure marketplace that connected domestic sellers to buyers in the market. As they developed, they found other ways to work within the Indian framework, and that included Fulfillment by Amazon, which was a program where they allowed sellers to store their products at Amazon distribution centers and have Amazon handle the delivery. They also helped teach businesses how to use e-commerce, and they made an attempt to make an aggressive acquisition of market share right up front rather than enter piecemeal as they did in China. So some of the lessons that they learned that they were able to apply, per binder, they recognized the need for local expertise, and they hired Mumbai-born VP for International Expansion, Amit Agarwal, to oversee their expansion into India because he knew the market. They also studied one of their main competitors in India who had had success, and that was Flipkart. Flipkart was able to address the logistic challenges with the non-sequential neighborhood numbering by creating their own PIN system and their own logistic network, and Amazon replicated that, creating their PIN system to identify neighborhoods, and that also assisted them in executing cash-on-delivery services, which was buyer preferences. In addition, they found ways like the aforementioned fulfillment by Amazon, as well as the mainstreaming sellers program, which taught small businesses how to sell online for a fee. Amazon was able to grow in India through these fee-based charges. So having ran into things like different regulatory frameworks in Brazil, as well as learning from entering China piecemeal and learning about buyer preferences such as wanting to pay cash on demand, and then when entering India, seeing the same problems they face in China in terms of infrastructure and rural buyers. We've taken some of these lessons to make recommendations for what Amazon should be considering when expanding into an emerging market. First off, we think that they should have country-specific expansion plans that are sensitive to the cultural dimensions of each country, including the buying preference of the customers and the delivery infrastructure. Even though a number of these countries are gaining internet access, that access is not important, or it won't matter if Amazon can't get these customers to access their services and if Amazon can't access these customers. So accessibility is going to be everything. They must learn the buyer preferences, again, cash on receipt of the item, and working through infrastructure challenges. Moreover, they need to be sensitive to the changing political dynamics. For example, Brazil, with the election of President Bolsonaro, there may be a move towards more privatization, whereas in China, under one country rule, and they'll have to identify risks that can come with a trade war between the United States, and they must also keep in mind the changing lifestyles of their buyers. As mentioned, India is now watching a lot of folks that are living in rural areas move to urban centers. China has a tiered society with a growing middle class, and Brazil actually offers more mobile users than China. So there might be opportunities for Amazon to focus on mobile in Brazil, whereas focusing on their marketplace in, for example, India. Thank you for listening.